The project doesn't fail at the end. It fails long before the first cut. You can lay everything out on your workbench, double check your measurements, follow the diagram exactly, and still end up with something that looks right, but doesn't fit together. That's the part that confuses most people, because visually, everything seems correct. The pieces match the drawing. The cuts look clean. The dimensions on paper make sense. And yet, when it's time to assemble, something is off. A joint won't close. A panel sits proud. A frame twists just enough to make you question every step you took. So what do? You go back and check your work. You measure again. You reread the instructions. You compare your cuts to the diagram. Everything still looks right. And that's where the frustration really starts to build. Because now it doesn't feel like a simple mistake. It feels like something you can't see. So you start adjusting. You sand a little more off one edge. You force a joint just slightly into place. You tell yourself it's close enough. Sometimes it works. Most of the time, it doesn't. And even when it does, you know it's not how it was supposed to go together. So the question becomes, why does this keep happening? Why do projects that look perfect on paper fall apart in real life? At first, it's easy to assume it's a skill issue. Maybe you think you're not measuring accurately enough. Maybe your tools aren't precise. Maybe you rushed a step. Those are logical explanations. And sometimes they're true, but they don't explain the pattern. Because this doesn't just happen once. It happens again and again and again. Different projects, different plans. Same result. Everything looks right. Until it's time to make it all fit together. And that's where most woodworkers start doubting themselves. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The problem often isn't in your execution. It's in the structure you're following. Most woodworking plans are designed to show you what the final piece should look like, not how the build actually works in sequence. They give you dimensions, but not relationships. They show you parts, but not dependencies. They assume steps instead of explaining them. And that creates a hidden gap between what you see and what you need to do. Think of it like assembling a puzzle where every piece is cut correctly, but no one told you the order in which they need to go together. Individually, the pieces are fine. Collectively, they don't cooperate. Because in woodworking, fit isn't just about size. It's about timing. It's about sequence. It's about how one cut affects the next. A panel that's off by a fraction of an inch might not matter on its own, but once it connects to 3 other parts, that tiny error multiplies. A step done slightly out of order can change how pressure is distributed across the entire piece. And suddenly, something that looked perfect on your bench refuses to align during assembly. That's not randomness. That's structure. Most plans don't account for this. They treat the build like a checklist. Cut this. Assemble that. Attach this piece. But real builds don't work like checklists. They work like systems. Every step depends on the one before it. Every measurement exists in relation to something else. And when that relationship isn't clearly defined, you're left trying to interpret it on your own. That's where things start to break down. Not because you can't build, but because you're being asked to fill in gaps that shouldn't be there in the first place. And over time, that creates a cycle. You start a project with confidence. You follow the plan as best as you can. Something doesn't fit. You troubleshoot, adjust, compensate. You finish the project, but it doesn't feel right. So the next time you hesitate, you second guess. You slow down not because the work is harder, but because you don't trust the process anymore. That's the real cost. Not the wasted wood. Not the extra time. It's the loss of clarity. Because when you don't fully trust the plan, every decision becomes heavier. And woodworking stops feeling like building and starts feeling like guessing. The real issue isn't that your project doesn't fit. It's that the plan you followed didn't account for how things actually come together. Once you see that, something shifts. You stop blaming individual mistakes. You start looking at the structure behind the instructions. You start asking different questions. Does this plan show the full assembly order? Are the measurements tied to real reference points? Does each step clearly lead into the next? That awareness doesn't instantly fix every project, but it changes how you approach them. You become less reactive, less dependent on trial and error, more focused on understanding how the build works as a whole. And that's where things start to come together literally. Because when the structure is clear, the execution becomes simpler. Not easier in effort, but clearer in direction. And that clarity is what turns a pile of parts into something that actually fits. If you want to go deeper into this, there's a structured breakdown in the description that walks through how to evaluate a plan before you ever start cutting. It's designed to help you see these gaps early so you don't run into them halfway through a build. And if this kind of thinking helps you look at your projects differently, you can subscribe for more breakdowns like this. Slow, clear, and focused on how things actually work. Because once you understand the structure, the results tend to follow.